talking! Oh yeah! Bacchus?
Why doesn't anybody ever want to meet Ringo?
You already know what I'm going to talk about. You've seen the title of the video down there. Yes, many people talk about their favourite things of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Their favourite episodes, favourite characters, favourite bits of music by Michael Donner and Junior Campbell. But they also like to talk about their favourite narrators of the show. Now, we've had many narrators in this show, such as Ringo Starr, Michael Angelis and Mark Morgan for the UK, and Ringo Starr, George Carlin, Alec Baldwin, Michael Brandon and Mark Morgan for the US, as well as Pierce Brosnan from James Bond as the narrator for US and UK versions of The Great Discovery. And out of all the narrators that have been in the show, the ones that most people remember are Ringo Starr in the UK and George Carlin in America. So which of them is the better narrator for the first few seasons of Thomas? It would be fair to say that Ringo Starr has become as familiar with Thomas the Tank Engine as he is with the Beatles. But when Ringo was first approached about taking the role back in the early 1980s, he wasn't sure whether or not he'd be willing to participate, thinking that children of the 1980s would not connect with the steam railway setting of the 40s and 50s. But after having heard his voice on Michael Parkinson's television programme after hearing an array of professional actors, Britt Allcroft was admitted that he was the right person to bring Thomas and his friends to life, and after a while Ringo agreed to take part. Ringo became the storyteller of the first two series of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, also lending his voice to tie-in audiobooks by Ladybird, which had become highly sought after. Ringo's association with the series led him overseas to America, where he continued his storytelling role as Mr. Conductor in Shining Time Station, Britt Allcroft's vehicle to launch Thomas in the USA. Ringo left the series in 1989 to pursue his music career and tour with his all-star band. Ringo has said in interviews following his departure that Thomas will always have a special place in his heart and that he is proud to be a part of Thomas's world. And no, I'm not going to say Ringo Starr's the best one immediately before you ask. Because unlike some people, I'm not going to be blinded by nostalgia just because I didn't grow up with George Carlin's narration. I'm going to treat this fair. George Carlin, on the other hand, joined the show because he saw Thomas, and even Shining Time Station, as the perfect opportunity to separate himself from always being an adult comedian, i.e. the guy with the 7 dirty words you can't say.
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits, fart, turd, and twat.
That lots of people knew him for, and to show a whole new side, the good side of himself. Yeah, when you do stuff like that, people don't usually associate you with being suitable for a kid show. But George did prove everyone wrong when he became the narrator for Thomas in America. He even developed a strong friendship with Britt Allcroft because they both had very difficult childhoods, and both of them agree that Thomas and Shining Time Station were a way of filling some kind of void, dealing with the hardships of childhood. George is remembered fondly by American fans for providing a more diverse voice range, much as Michael Angelis did for the UK in the 90s, and delivering these voices in an accent that they could relate to. George left the series in 1995 to pay greater attention to his stand-up comedy routine and pursue other projects in television and movies. However, much like Ringo Starr, he remained fond of the series and highly complimentary of the work Britt Allcroft and David Mitton put in to make Thomas a success. Sadly, George left us at the age of 71 on the 22nd of June 2008 due to heart failure. Britt Allcroft, for whom George contributed as storyteller to Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends as Mr. Conductor on Shining Time Station, have written lovely tributes to the man. Of course, it's easy to just turn around and say which one is better than the other, but the best thing to do to compare them is to compare their voices and their styles of narration. Like, for example, let's compare their narrations for this scene in Whistles and Sneezes.
At the station, everyone held their ears. The Fat Controller held his ears too. Take him away, he bellowed, and stop that noise.
Now, when Ringo Starr was narrating, he used to give a lot of oomph in his voice when the characters had to shout and bellow, giving it his all in every recording. George Carlin, on the other hand,
At the station, everyone covered their ears. Sir Topham Hatt covered his ears, too. Take him away, he bellowed, and stop that noise.
now while he does a lot of good voices, he just doesn't seem to be as dramatic and oomphy in his voice as Ringo Starr was. Like, even when the Fat Controller was bellowing, he still keeps that same tone of voice that he had. Even though George Carlin didn't have the amount of oomph and energy that Ringo Starr did during storytelling, he did more than make up for it for his range of voices for the characters. And his storytelling is much better than
Help me, please.
that. A lot of people associate Ringo Starr as being the drummer for the Beatles, as well as being the main singer in his all-star rock band. But a lot of people fondly remember him for narrating Thomas the Tank Engine in the UK and the US. And Griddlecroft choosing Ringo Starr as the narrator for the first two seasons is kind of a no-brainer since he sounds the damn part. And George Carlin was mostly remembered in his time for doing stand-up comedy with dirty words such as
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits, fart, turd, and twat.
And you wouldn't think that a guy that says
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits, fart, turd, and twat
would be suitable to narrate a children's TV show. But he surprised everyone in the US when he took the part of Thomas, as it showed a good side of him where he doesn't have to swear all the time. And unlike Alec Baldwin, who would be George's replacement years later, George did at least try to do a Scottish accent for the Scottish characters. And he did a pretty good job of it too. So both of these national stars narrated Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends in the best way they could, and making them as memorable as Thomas the Tank Engine himself. But which narrator is the best? While both narrators do a really good job of bringing Thomas the Tank Engine to life in the 80s and 90s, I am honestly going to have to go with Ringo Starr as my favourite narrator. Not just because I grew up with him, but because to me he sounds the part and tells the stories really, really well. And George Carlin tells the stories well in his own way, but I didn't grow up in America, so I wouldn't have much of an opinion on George Carlin's voices. So for me, I'm going to have to go with Ringo. I like George Carlin's range of voices for some of the episodes I have seen, but I really love Ringo Starr's take on it, since he has lots of oomph in his voice, and he sounds the part. So some people like Ringo more, and some people like George more, but I like Ringo more, not just because I grew up with him, but because of all the things I mentioned, having more oomph in his voice and sounding the part. And if you like George Carlin more than Ringo Starr, then that's your opinion, and that's fine. But whichever one you like more, I think we can all agree that George Carlin and Ringo Starr are two of the best Thomas narrators that the show has ever had. Are there any other Thomas narrators you like more than Ringo and George? Well, put them down in the comment section below and let me know what you think. I'm Dalek44, and I'll see you next time, folks. God, I love this hat. Even though both narrators did a really great job of narrating Thomas the Tank Engine, I really am going to have to go with Ringo Starr as my favourite one. Because he just sounds the part and he really did a brilliant job of doing... Oh, dear. Alright, I'm going to get it right this time.